This video is brought to you by Squarespace. 3 identical models, 3 different time lengths. Let's see what my priorities are for painting in these 3 trials. Let's start with the 10-minute trial. I have no idea if I'm going to be able to paint a model this quickly. In my world, it's not possible to paint a model in 10 minutes, so I don't even know the correct approach to this. At first, one might think that a hairdryer is a helpful tool to dry paint faster, but honestly, I don't think we have time for a hairdryer. I gotta be slapping down fatty, thick coats of paint at all times. I've painted a few models from the same faction as the miniatures we're using in today's test, so I have my palette figured out. I just don't know where the specific colors are going on this mini. I've arranged the paints I'll need on my palette at the right dilution, sort of a base coat dilution because we're looking for opacity right away. I think there are 2 possible outcomes for today's 10-minute trial. 1, I won't finish, or 2, I will finish and it will look like trash. So let's hope for a third option. Painting a model in 10 minutes is honestly kind of liberating. When the timer ends, I have a finished model. In 10 minutes. Finished might be a relative term, and I'll definitely get people asking me, so when are you going to finish this model? But that isn't the point. Not a whole lot happens in a 10-minute paint job, so let's break it down. I started from a black base coat because there's no way I can cover every part of this model, so whatever I miss needs to be black. Initially, I'm just painting base coats as quickly as I can. I even subbed out a certain color that I used on my earlier House Greyjoy models, mahogany from Procryl, with a GW paint of similar hue because the GW paint has better coverage. In some cases, I'm not even trying to get opacity all over, but leaving behind black as a means of a shadow, so this way I get free shadows without needing to apply a wash or paint any shadows in. If I was smart, I would have done the same thing with the metallics, but I was rushing a bit too much to be able to accomplish that. With what little time I had remaining after doing a half-assed base coating job, I applied some highlights. The name of the game here is spending your time in the right places, which sounds like a really boring game.
All right, got a sick new board game. Can't wait to try it out. What is this trash?
The back of the model doesn't exist to me at this point. I'm trying to apply highlights to areas exclusively around the head and shoulders, the area where I want to draw attention to on the model. But even as I say that, I still apply some fairly bright highlights to the model's knees. This was a mistake that I made in the heat of the moment. Before I could ever hope to fix a mistake like that, my time was done. Alright, let's review. If I'm being totally honest, this model is never going to stay like this. There are details that are entirely unpainted on the back. I'm going to finish this mini to a standard that I think is more acceptable, but that doesn't mean I think it looks bad necessarily. I think I might have been able to get to that point where I'd considered it done in another 10 to 15 minutes. However, just because I don't think the model looks air quotes done right now doesn't mean that you or anyone else can't think of this model as done. Miniature painting is an art form, which is to say that it is subjective. If this is your done, then that's totally fine. Considering that this is a model that is designed to exist in a unit of 11 more of these dudes, this paint job might not be so bad with some basing added and 5 feet of obscurity to soften the view. Alright, let's crack on with the next experiment, 1 hour. 1 hour is a lot of time for a model like this. In an armament painting situation where you'd be batch painting a unit of these guys, after painting the unit was all said and done, you would have likely spent around 45 minutes on each model, typically. So I have about 15 minutes of luxury. Because of this, my approach is going to be entirely different. With the black base coat down, I applied a zenithal highlight of white ink from above. With this lighting information down, I then applied a bunch of half coverage base coats. This means the paint will be fairly thin. The intention here is to be able to use the zenithal undercoat to my advantage. If I were to apply base coats that were largely opaque, like on trial number 1, I'd obscure the white and black gradation on the model, so we have to be careful to preserve it if we want to fully leverage it. With paint this thin, it's very easy to end up washing the model with the color we're base coating with, and we want to avoid that. Before applying paint to this miniature, dab the brush off into your paper towel so that when you paint, you're applying an even filter of color to the model, not super soaking it. The problem with this method sometimes is that you get fairly desaturated colors because you're never reaching the full opacity of the paints you're using, only a filter over white and black. When you mix a color with white or black, which is effectively what we're doing here, the color will always desaturate. Because of this, I will often apply 2 coats of paint to the areas that I want to be a little bit more juicy, like the blue of this character's cloak. With the colors down, I applied a wash of brown to give me some more separation of detail between all the different elements of this model. I've attempted this painting method before and subbed out brown for different colors, but I keep coming back to brown for some reason. Reasonably, blue would have been nice here, but I think brown is great because it's neutral. If I was dealing with a different model that had possibly more skin tone, blue would look kind of strange over a skin-like color. So, using brown offers up some kind of consistency across your paint job, as it's able to be applied to a wider variety of subjects. With the wash dried, I started applying highlights. Just like with the 10-minute trial, I'm focusing my efforts around the head and shoulders, making everything around those elements brighter. It was during this trial that I began to realize that I wasn't happy with where I was placing the colors. This model has so many folds of fabric, and I was struggling to treat them all individually and uniquely. I chose colors for the lower elements of the model that were likely too bright, again, sort of not keeping with what my intention was. I tried to go into these paint jobs without much thought. This way, the process seemed more honest, and this is the result of that decision, I suppose. With this trial, I was able to wash and apply highlights to the metallics, something I didn't have time for with the last trial. I even had time to add a little blood to the blade, something quick and easy that lifts the paint job so much. Alright, time is up. Before we compare the two, let's hear a brief word from our sponsor. Squarespace is an online website builder that can be a very powerful tool for commissioned painters looking to get their feet on the ground. You can integrate point of sale into your website to sell commissions online while also showing off your paint quality with a ton of helpful features like automatic image scaling, double-click zoom in, and more. I use my Squarespace to create a gallery for all the miniature art that I've painted so I can share it with my friends and family, because at this point, Aunt Amy still doesn't know what I do, but she can appreciate it digitally. When you're ready to launch your commission painting career so you can realize for yourself how much you hate painting other people's models, head to Squarespace for a free trial or squarespace.com/Miniac with code Miniac for 10% off a purchase of a website or domain. Alright, back to my time trials. Probably an obvious observation, but the 1-hour paint job looks better. One thing that I was struck by immediately was how much brighter the 1-hour paint job was, but this makes sense. With more time, I'm able to use more layers of paint. With a black base coat, you need layers to build up opacity to reach brighter colors, and layers take time. Also, the white zenithal undercoat definitely contributed. I also had time to break up areas more. If you look at the helmet of both models, I was able to put blue on the domed piece, which I think broke up the metallics nicely. I was also able to paint some eyes in his helmet, something close to a modern miracle in this time frame, which helps improve the paint job, but wouldn't really do anything if we were viewing this as a unit about 5 feet away. Okay, interesting conclusions, but what can I do with 10 hours? 10 hours allows me to do pretty much whatever I want, so let's do that. I, yet again, started from a black base coat and slowly built up layers of opacity, starting with the cloak. I took my time because, well, I had it. This meant that my layers of paint could be crisp and clean. Additionally, I added some texture to the cloak with stippling. Maybe the fabric is made from something with a heavier stitch, and I wanted to simulate that with some brighter dots. Not only did this give me some texture, it also acted as a highlight, brightening up a detail that I wanted to draw attention to. In every single trial, I'm thinking about drawing the attention of the viewer to the head and shoulders. Pretty interesting. With more time, I was able to think more clearly about what each piece of fabric was. I could see where one article of clothing began and where it finished, so I was able to make sense of that with how I painted the miniature. I picked a khaki color for his vest/jacket this time because it's a color I want to use in my scheme, and this detail is higher up on the miniature. I don't want to save this color for later when I'm painting his pants like on the previous trial. I began to paint the lower parts of the model, and I could tell I was slipping into the same mistake I was making earlier, making the lower portion of the model too bright. This time, however, I was able to adjust, and with some dark navy blue glazing, I brought down the light blue sufficiently such that it was only bright right where I wanted it to be, where the highlight colors are. As an aside, I was doing this portion of the model during a live stream on Twitch. If you want to catch my live streams, head over to twitch.tv/Miniac at 1 p.m. CST on Fridays. I paint for a little over 3 hours and sometimes have someone painting with me. Okay, back on topic. Keeping my goals in mind, the remaining fabric on his legs were all painted with fairly dark colors. Next, I moved on to the brown leather. What I improved here was making the brown darker. I always dislike how when I paint brown over a zenithal undercoat, like I did in trial number 2, I get this light brown color. I want a deep, rich, warm brown color to contrast nicely with all the blue that I have going on. I spent more time with the beard, using a more realistic hair color, but also trying to detail each twist and bend of his beard. For the metallics, I could have tried to do non-metallic metal, but I ultimately stuck with true metallics, but the process changed. I first base coated the metals with a darker blue color and then applied highlights with a dark metallic silver. This simply gives me more control with my shading. However much blue I leave behind is how thin my lines of separation between each scale in the scale mail will be, whereas with a wash, like we did in trial number 2, the lines will be a little bit less crispy while also being easier to accomplish. Lastly, I highlighted with Molotow Chrome, a mirror-like silver, to get an incredibly bright highlight right at the end. This was a nice touch that I think I'll definitely be doing again in the future. So, how to be fair? Comparing it to the previous trial, everything is just tighter. The lines are more consistent, the highlights are smooth where I want them to be, they're rough where I want them to be. I was able to make artsy decisions like creating a viewing window of brown colors that, when traced, hem in the viewer's attention to the center of the model. I could add wood grain to the axe handles, but probably the most interesting difference was with the paint scheme. From the 2 previous trials, I was able to learn what worked and what didn't. With trial number 2, I leaned too much into the idea of using blue to the point where it almost looked cartoonish. With this final test, not only does it look technically better, but the way the color is organized on the model looks more realistic and also accomplishes what I've been trying to accomplish the entire video. I'm curious what you guys think of these 3 paint jobs. Which one would you be happy with for your army given the time invested? There are a couple of ideas used in trial number 3, like the Molotow Chrome, the color organization, etc., that could be used in a 1-hour paint job to great effect. It has me excited to actually descend the ladder. What I mean by that is that I'd like to try another 1-hour paint job and another 10-minute paint job to see what happens. If you're interested in seeing that video and the conclusions therein, let me know. For now though, that'll be it for this video. As a reminder from last week's video, I am running a Kickstarter campaign sometime in the future, and here is another quick teaser. If you want to read weekly updates about the campaign, make sure to sign up to my mailing list, which I'll have linked in the description below. I wrote my first email last Monday, and it was a ton of fun recounting the beginning of this massive project I went on, and it's finally coming to a close. Alright, that's going to do it for this video, guys. If you'd like to give it a thumbs up, if you want to support the channel, there are a number of ways that you can do that, namely a Patreon campaign with a bunch of fun rewards, like a Discord server, where you can hang out and chat about your management projects, or... Yes, I realize that mumbling while trying to advertise my Patreon features to you is a bad idea, but maybe it was funny. You can also support the channel by buying the miniature I make, the Duchess, and the digital course for it, or buying hobby gear that I recommend in the description with the affiliate links. Subscribe or die! And most importantly, don't forget to hit more metal!